Hey guys, it's Jack. I just wanted to talk to you today about a way that you can help support the podcast if you're not already. To support the channel is to become a Patreon member. So we have Patreon memberships that start at just $5 a month. And when you sign up, you get access to all of our episodes ad-free. That's the big bonus for that. I mean, we also do some Patreon bonus episodes for our subscribers. But this is the biggest and best way that you can support the Team House channel and podcast if you'd like to. And we really appreciate that. So go and check us out at patreon.com/the Team House.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Eyes On. I'm Andy Milburn.
I'm Jason Lyons.
I'm Dimitri Kontakos.
And so today, I'm going to kick off with an interesting story with personal connection here. Jason, what's up with your old friend Julian Assange? Things are moving at last. They see. I know you guys go way back, so
Yeah.
And bear in mind that a number of us are dummies, but try and break it down for us, and we can talk about Mr. Julian after that.
Absolutely. So yeah, Julie sent me a that's what we call him on the circuit. Julie sent me,
which coincidentally is his wife's name too. That must have been very confusing.
We so apparently he is currently in the Northern Marianas Islands, which might be a surprise to some because the last everyone knew he was in a British prison. Well, first in Ecuadorian.
Yeah, tell us what happened there.
Yeah, so going back really quick, his actual true name is Julian Hawkins. I don't know where the Assange came from, but most people know him as being the founder of WikiLeaks in 2006. Became infamous for leaking footage a la Chelsea Manning of U.S. airstrikes, military logs from Afghanistan, Iraq, and U.S. diplomatic cables, which really was a no-no. So back in 2010, as he was starting, WikiLeaks was starting to, the name was starting to get out there because of Chelsea Manning. He was November 2010. Sweden charged him issued an arrest warrant against Assange for sexual assault allegations. Instead of
and that was that. So it was brought by Sweden because it was a Swedish national, or because
I believe it was a Swedish national.
Or it occurred. Yeah.
Yep. So instead
and what does Assange, does he claim this is trumped up? Because I'm wondering,
Yes.
I mean, his wife doesn't seem to have a problem with it, or.
Yeah, he's always maintained his innocence on that. And to be honest with you, I don't even know whatever came of it. I think the WikiLeaks and conspiracy charges overtook all that, which is sad. But I would have to look into what. Oh, I'm sorry. Looks like they dropped the investigation in 2019. Swedish prosecutor.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. But in between that, he took off and sought refuge in the Embassy of Ecuador in London in June of 2012. He claimed political persecution because he thought he would be extradited to the United States, which he would have been. He actually, even little side note, during that time, he stood up the WikiLeaks party in the Australian Senate, but failed to win one seat. No surprise there. So during this time in the Ecuadorian embassy, he made himself a bad guest. There's pictures of his cat wearing a bow tie in the window, all kinds of stuff. He made all kinds of demands that the Ecuadorian officials, couldn't or didn't want to go through with. So
and he was embarrassing them, right? Because he was embarrassing them. Appearances at the window and.
Yep. So eventually in 2019, the Ecuadorian officials invited the police in, the UK police in. They went in, they arrested him on charge of breaching the Bail Act, and he was sentenced to 50 weeks in prison. At the same time, the US government unsealed a indictment charging him with conspiracy to commit computer intrusion related to the Manning leaks.
Oh, so that was the single felony charge.
Yep, that was
because they all reduced it to a single felony charge, and that is it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you read that again, Jason?
He had two more in May of 2019 and June of 2020, they unsealed new indictments against him, charging him with violating the Espionage Act of 1917 and also conspiring with hackers. He was incarcerated in the HM. I assume that stands for
His Majesty's
His Majesty's Prison Belmarsh in London. And then during this time, U.S. extradition efforts were ongoing. And but as of yesterday, 2 days ago, he reached a plea agreement with the U.S. prosecutors, pleading guilty to a charge under the U.S. Espionage Act, conspiring to obtain and disclose classified U.S. national defense documents. So, and this was plea deal was in order to avoid potential imprisonment in the U.S. So he was flown to the North Marianas Islands. He'll appear in court Wednesday, 9 a.m. local time Wednesday. He'll plead guilty and then he'll be set free. He can do whatever he wants.
So the Marianas, it just occurred to me, it was really to keep the media away.
Mm-hmm.
The announcement of the plea deal, and then he's already there, and it just didn't give people, the media, enough time to get out there. And no major paper's going to have a stringer out there in the Marianas just standing ready. So
this broke last night, and he jumped on a plane literally last night. That was it.
So it was well orchestrated.
Yep. And I'm just reading something now that says after this is all over, he'll be taken to Bangkok. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just the place you want to send an alleged rapist, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The whole thing with the Ecuadorian embassy too, it just reeks, this whole thing reeks of immaturity. And I think, my feeling is we US government have given him center stage, which is all he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about, and this is open for discussion and argument, obviously, but the damage to national security, I don't know, damage to national security of what Assange leaked, primarily diplomatic documents, embarrassing diplomatic documents, to include the revelation that the US had bugged Chancellor of Germany, right?
Yeah,
had listened.
But,
and a number of other things, and then some serious stuff about also, it's all serious, but about war crimes in Iraq, which actually were investigated, So my point is, yeah, it's embarrassing, but there was nothing here that I felt brought the edifice coming shattering down. Everyone, why no one got really pissed off or broke off diplomatic relations because of stuff released in WikiLeaks, because everyone knows that happens. That is global geopolitics. You do shit that you don't want other countries, even your best allies, to know about. All right, because everyone operates in their own national interest, but they do things that are embarrassing and they don't want others to know about it. So what? Assange released, one cache of these things, which are already outdated, which just shows kind of a very naive view of the world if he thinks that. That's the world. That's how major powers toddle along without coming to blows, is lying to each other. It's come along. But, and I felt that we just made too much of him.
I agree.
Just said, hey, let's just charge him with rape. We don't get, the rest of that stuff. Yeah, it's embarrassing, but it's just not worth our time. The US would have looked really big on this. And Assange, he's now just a rapist. Alleged rapist, like the guy that I just won a lawsuit against.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Michael Ryan Burke.
Shout out.
Michael Ryan Burke. Yeah. Now we're speaking of rapist, alleged rapist.
Yeah, I agree. He was, as the saying goes that I cannot stand, he was a big nothing burger as far as I'm concerned. He didn't reveal anything earth-shattering, anything that was futuristic, as in like future plans. He just released stuff that was already pretty much known. And again, like you said, every country does it. I'm not saying that it's right, quote unquote, but it is right. It's what everyone does. And so he's not. It was more of a power trip than anything, as far as I'm concerned.
I think what spun him back into to the news was WikiLeaks and the whole DNC email stuff. I think that's what kind of gave it a little amplification.
Yeah.
That is true. And that's when, of course, Trump jumped on board at the time and said positive things about WikiLeaks, which kind of So yeah,
I mean, but
anyway,
at the same time, like when Trump, like the Trump administration was kicking around ideas on how to clip Assange, like as he's being transferred from the embassy to
what do you mean clip?
like kill him.
Kill him? No.
Sorry, that's like that's bridge and tunnel speak for kill.
Tunnel.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
No.
it's in the
Really?
Guardians and everywhere. Yeah, it's just
Oh my God.
2021.
Well, there you go. You know, I mean, if you read
CIA guys too, by the way.
if you read,
Jay.
yeah, I mean, in fact, Jason would have been a good choice for this because previous
Nobody would have
relationship.
seen a black eye coming.
Yeah, you could have blended in. Actually, you'd be surprised. You know, Sweden is no longer. Sweden is very diverse. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else on this side? He just seems like a really unpleasant person. You know, he seems like not and we gave him too much attention. We've given him too much attention.
I mean, he's a megalomaniac. You know he's gonna have a podcast in like a few months. He's gonna go on the circuit. He's gonna be on every fucking show.
Yeah, Team House, all those. You know.
I mean, we'd have him on. I'd have him on for sure, just because of the
Would
numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think? Yeah.
I would have a former Al Qaeda guy
on the Team House, right?
Yeah,
Not necessarily on Eyes On.
I mean, I'm open to hearing.
I mean, we've got slightly higher standards
than the Team House. You're not wrong about
no,
that.
No. Here in the Eyes On.
Yeah. Then compared to the regular Team House, I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be interesting to hear another perspective. Maybe like a former Al Qaeda guy or.
I agree.
No, 100%. I think, of course, Jason and I might have some problems clearance wise. You know, are you tracking that? Someone interviewed a terrorist who had a clearance. I mean, he had a clearance. He interviewed he was a journalist. He interviewed a terrorist, and now it's catching up on him.
Really?
Yes. I mean, yeah. So I'm very.
All right, so we'll leave it for the Team House.
No. I mean, we can negotiate around this. Maybe you'll be the cutout, the front man, and Jason and I will be in the next room.
No, so I'm thinking.
Hey, Dee, ask him about USS Cole.
Yes.
Yeah. No, so we would do it with the Team House proper. We would do it on the Team House proper.
No, I mean, seriously, I think that's a great idea because
that's
who does that,
awesome
right?
Idea.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever done it?
They had one guy on some YouTube show that was a former Al Qaeda guy, but he was an Al Qaeda guy before 9/11. He's a bomb maker.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, and he was.
Yeah,
but he ended up being
Al Qaeda.
I think he ended up being an MI6 agent for a while.
That's cheating.
He got out.
Yeah, no double agents. We don't want turncoats.
Yeah.
Although the guy who wrote, there's a really good book called Son of Hamas. It was written about 10 years ago by a guy who was in Hamas, turned by the Israelis, I believe, became a double agent.
I would love to talk to that guy on the Team House. Yeah.
Let me look it up. It's if you guys you can look it up on Amazon. It was a popular book. It was required reading at MARSOC. I think it was on a battalion reading list, and I picked it up and read it, and it's really good. If you want to learn about what it's like growing up in Gaza and recruiting into Hamas, training, all of that stuff, kind of the culture, the mentality, and the hold that they have, read that book, you know, and it's really interesting. And he talks about his interrogation under the Israelis, and he doesn't have an axe to grind, you know, because he's not he's not campaigning for a two-state solution or anything. He is like, hey, here's what took place, kind of thing. I mean, it is an indictment of Hamas, obviously, but it gives some really good. I mean, of course, not that that's a bad thing. Oh my God, I'm going to get vilified. No, absolutely.
I mean, people have to assume it's going to be an indictment of Hamas. He's a double agent, right? He has some kind of axe to grind to work for the Israelis.
But you know what? You know what'd be interesting to read is someone who was not a turncoat, you know, who presented their arguments. It's like, here's how I can justify this. That would be really interesting. Because you don't know what you're getting from a turncoat, right?
I've always wanted to talk to like John Walker Lind. That guy, remember the American Taliban?
Yeah.
He's writing op-eds for, like, I think The Intercept.
Is he really?
Is he? Oh, for The Intercept, my favorite paper.
I know. I figured that would trigger you, Andy.
Yeah. Oh, you're just bullshitting me.
No, I swear to God.
Okay.
Yeah. He wrote op-eds for The Intercept. Yes.
Be very
So that's super cool. I mean, he should write op-eds. But The Intercept is particularly good for a trader to write for. If you still regard him as a trader. I don't care, frankly. Traders don't bother me unless they're selling secrets, and then they really fucking bother me. But knuckleheads like that who really just didn't even get to basic training. I don't, I can't muster up anger because someone like that makes decisions based on a very immature mind. And every day across this country, millions of kids are making very bad decisions. Sometimes resulting in loss of life. So, we put him on a different pedestal because he turned into a traitor, but in actual fact, he was less of a dramatic figure than your average criminal. For what he actually did. All he did was buy a ticket to Afghanistan and turn up the recruit training camp. But before 9/11, I might add, right?
Yeah.
So.
And he was rolled up like relatively fast into
very quickly.
Yeah.
I think, I can't remember what I think it was a Mazar Sharif.
Yeah.
And Spann
passed away.
Killed. Spann was
Mark Murphy. And there was a bunch of SBS guys. Anyway, that was
there was one Green Beret, Justin Sapp, who we've had on the Team House multiple times.
Oh yeah.
Toby Hardin wrote a good book about it called The First Casualty.
So many books.
That's a good book. I love it.
Because we keep looking back to that because it was a successful campaign. It was a successful irregular warfare campaign. But we can't overdo it. We keep going on and on and on about horse soldiers, blah, blah, blah. It was one event where it went marginally well, not completely, and that was good. And we should have learned from those lessons, but we didn't. All right. We subsequently went in with a heavy touch everywhere we went. But where we've done well, I know this is a separate topic, Afghanistan early days, Plan Colombia, El Salvador. We had a light touch, small groups of SF or highly selected conventional forces guys in the roles of advisors, trainers, and we do very well. It's when we saturate the battlefield with crunchies, with conventional soldiers, that we start to come a cropper. And there's a natural drift on that too, right? I mean, of course, more. I digress.
Let me ask you, Andy, when like Afghanistan was happening, right, in that first year when it was like primarily SOF and CIA, and the local forces, was like big army spinning up, like, hey, we want to get in on our big military, we want to get in on this, we want to get really like, sink our teeth.
Yeah.
Is there like a lobbying thing that happens there?
Yeah. Oh my God, it's sickening. Yeah. It's everyone wants to turn in the barrel, everyone, because it's probably the fairest way to describe it is, of course, because we all devote our careers and lives to preparing for conflict, that when our nation is involved in conflict, it's natural that we should want to be involved. Okay, that's kind of a natural and selfish explanation, but it's also true for many, and they're very aware that unless they have combat zone fitness reports, they're not going to be highly competitive at the next level, which is the be all and end all of their motivation. There is that type of officer, right, of soldier, of career NCO, but the battling at GO level is going to time, or rather not GO level, colonel, lieutenant colonel, but also GO level, represent wanting
GO is general officer.
Okay. And I mean, I've suffered through this. The decision to send a Marine Special Operations Task Force to Iraq instead of an Army one was a very emotional, not for me, but it's a very emotional decision for certainly Army SF guys, and it wasn't their decision, and they opposed it. Thank you, General Cleveland, right until the end. But that's my point, is that everyone wants to show that they had skin in the game. When I did go to Iraq, in the headquarters above me were 1,000 personnel, very top heavy in rank, to include no less than 12 general officers. Jesus. Over a task force of 500 people.
Right. What do they do, Andy?
Never have so few people been led by so many. Exactly. They fucking held up ConOps. That's what they did. because our ConOps had to go from cubicle to cubicle to cubicle, and
every
every one of them had to put their imprint on it, right? Because that is their staff officer. This is very risky because I happen to know this tribe, and I was here back in, we met. I'll never forget, the commanding general, 101st Airborne, who kept saying, "I've been here 6 times," and one of my guys muttered under his breath, "And you learn nothing each time." But I did hear someone asking a civilian, "Did you ever know an Iraqi any of those 6 times?"
Somebody said that to him?
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly when it happened, okay? All right, I know it's a side story, but it's a funny one. Okay, so, and this has all kinds of, I think all kinds of, it's a parable, right? But it happened, sadly. So there was 2016, there was it was kind of supposed to be the breakout campaign. It's supposed to be the Operation Cobra to get up the middle Euphrates Valley, and start to invest in Mosul. And I forget the name of the Operation Valley something. It doesn't matter. But anyway, so the big centerpiece of this was the Iraqi generals, to include their Chad, who, by the way, I was an advisor to in the Battle of Fallujah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He's now head of the Iraqi armed forces. No kidding. He is the Chad. Back then, he was a Major Ahmed Abdul, and I won't mention his last name. Anyway, so there's this big rehearsal, and they've got Iraqi media in there filming some of it, not the actual plan, right? And then you know how the army loves these massive terrain models. They've had, a battalion of soldiers making this terrain model because that's all their soldiers did. They weren't allowed off base, so they guarded gates, and they did things like secure porta shitters and make terrain models for their 7 months, and they got to wear that patch on the right shoulder. But anyway, so there's this great terrain model of showing the objectives and all that. Bottom line is, the Americans get up and they talk through the plan. Think about this. The Iraqis are executing this plan, but it is officers from 101st Airborne who are telling them what they're going to do, right? So far, okay, except not really good to have Americans deliver an order to Iraqis in front of their own generals in a sovereign country, right? Much better to have their guys issue the order, and Americans assist. Mistake number 1. Anyway, there's a river crossing. That's why the Americans have to brief it, because only the American army can ever cross a river, right? And it is just a fucking massive show as usual. The Sosa smoke barrage begins at 0 minus 10, blah blah blah, and then we're gonna have this and that. And it goes on for about 30 minutes, and the translators, it goes on longer than that because the translators are having to translate. And at the end, the general, I'm trying so hard not to say his name, the general, 101st Airborne, complete silence, turns to the major general who is going to command the operation. Remember, the head of the Chad is in the room, and he says, "So, what are your thoughts?" And the major general goes, "Swear to God, this is true. We're gonna die."
Oh, Jesus. Concept.
Exactly those words. Except no, we're all gonna die. And he's on his feet, and he's just almost in tears. And the look of nonplussed shock among the Americans around that terrain model. And, those of us who, I know this sounds like arrogant, it's not intended to be, but those of us who, with some soft background or advisor background, are just thinking, what did you think was going to happen, dudes? You set this up. It was a patronizing show. And you aren't going to be the ones out there in the breach, I mean, what do you mean you were fucking briefing it? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was all glossed over. The slides had the 101st Airborne stamp. It was declared a great success. Not everyone did die. Very few people died, although the Iraqi Air Force did their best to make sure that more Iraqi soldiers did die by bombing us no less than 3 times. But enough of that. I digress. All right. Hey, D, we can make this. Yeah, we can make it a show one, right?
No, so we got more going on right
now.
now.
No. Cut that part out.
while you were talking, sorry, this came in, and I don't know if you knew about this already, but apparently Israel's Supreme Court ruled that ultra Orthodox Jewish men must be drafted into the military. It says a blow to Prime Minister Netanyahu that could lead to the collapse of his increasingly fragile governing coalition. So I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Apparently, they were exempt. 13% of this Israeli society, they were exempt because they study full-time in religious seminaries. I guess that's going
Yeshiva.
away.
Yeah.
That's definitely going to cause some problems for his
process.
right flank. No, for Netanyahu.
No, this is a long-standing game. Okay, so the Supreme Court, I'll tell you what's just happened, or I mean, with my perception of that, and then just go back and to explain the issue. But Netanyahu has to give in to this, but his backers on the right don't agree with it, and of course his ultra-Orthodox backers do not agree with it. But he knows it's going to take time, so. He passes something, he knows it's going to get challenged. That doesn't bother him too much because it isn't the end state he cares about, as always. It is the process, it is survival, it is support. So as long as he can be seen to be making sure that the draft in Israel applies to all, which is the real issue here for many, right? It's not that they're anti-religious. It's, hey, if we're going to fight, we don't have big enough population to afford to tell these tens of thousands of people you don't have to join up, right? Yeah. That's kind of the argument. And there's also the subscript of, and by the way, you guys are causing all the fucking problems. That's not my subscript, but it is a subscript among some Israelis, right? Hey, you guys are the ones beating up Arabs, burning down villages, killing people in the West Bank. And we're the ones who have to deal with it, and you don't have to put on a uniform, pick up a weapon, and do it. There's an argument. People will object to me and say I'm mixing up the ultra-right with the ultra-Orthodox, but naturally there's a shaded area in the Venn diagram. Anyway, bottom line is this. It's been a festering sore for some time. Netanyahu promised that he would do this, and now he wants to be seen to do it, but he knows it's going to take a long time, and he is probably telling his friends on the right, hey, relax, this is going to take years, which it will, because even if the Supreme, just implementation of everything that needs to happen is going to take a long time. And for a while, it's going to involve more effort, more manpower than it produces, okay? Because these students have to be inducted in a certain way, yeshiva. And to take a step back, why is there such a large Haredi population in Israel, and what is their function? Well, the Haredis are they are meant to encapsulate the Eastern European Jewish population in the pre-war years, or the early part of the 20th century, and a population that was almost entirely annihilated in the war. Specifically when I say Eastern Europe, mainly Poland, and the Haredis there were very, very strong. And they're not strong, but there were a lot of them. Of course, they were annihilated, perhaps, disproportionately, who knows, because they are pacifists. They didn't resist. Many of them didn't even try to escape. And they were herded to the gas chambers and killed, almost exterminated. So in the aftermath of the war, as Ben Gurion is the first Israeli prime minister, one of his projects was to preserve the Haredi culture, all right, in Israel. And so they gave them priority on the ships coming over to Israel. They set up communities for them. They set up, they allowed them to set up the yeshiva system really, and those who, forgive me as a goyim trying to explain this, but so for the Jewish religion to prosper and continue, especially in the diaspora, you need a cadre of people who are constantly, propagating, not propagating is the wrong word, but studying, the religious rules, applying them to modern society, able to answer questions from from adherents, hey, can I ride in an elevator on Shabbat? All these things that Haredis answer, right? And these are important questions to many Israelis. So they do fulfill a function. I mean, but the problem is, not the problem. They breed, okay? They breed and they breed, and they have a lot of kids. So now you get this kind of large flock of Haredis, and there are those among the Israelis who refer to them as penguins. So that's not a bad analogy. And of course, they just keep procreating, and the question becomes, okay, now they're a significant percentage of the Israeli population. Can we afford still to give them the exemptions? Do they even need to be protected in the way that they were in the immediate post-war years? So all of this is kind of context behind what is going on. Some Haredi, very few support this. Most oppose it, but they're not vehemently in opposition. Difficult to have demonstrations against the draft when your country is at war, right?
Yeah.
So, again, that's another good time to do this, right? When the country is at war, rather than in times of peace.
Awesome.
Sorry, D.
No, that was great.
Yeah, I didn't mean to
3 minutes.
interrupt. It
No,
just
that was
popped up on my
incredible.
phone. So
Yeah, so Netanyahu has promised to ensure they integrate, but there's all kinds of things that have to be taken care of because they have special diets. They can't do certain things. They have to have, I'm talking about them as though they're a strange species of animal. I don't mean to do that. I'm just saying that just the way, I'm going to get even more trouble when we integrated females into the infantry, women into the infantry. You had to think about all of these things, right? That's no longer dudes only. Well, in this case, yeah, the Haredi soldier, the question is, do you make him just live like an Israeli soldier? For instance, in an Arab army, it doesn't matter. I mean, they all get group exemption for certain things when they're in the army. Will that apply to the Haredis? Hey, suck it up. You're going to use electric stuff, and it doesn't matter if it's Shabbat. You're going to have to bayonet people on Shabbat, and that involves work. Who knows? It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
And how much, and will it cause tension? Probably not. One thing Israel does have, despite its huge rifts, is 7 October, internal rifts, 7 October did ultimately have a unifying effect and papered over some of these cracks within Israeli society. But they're starting to become apparent now as war, the longest war Israel's ever been in, enters its 10th month. 10th or 9th. Yeah. Anyway, long way in, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like it's probably going to it's going to get longer because they're, working on Hezbollah in the north.
Yeah, and that's, we talked about this a little bit. Whether so many variables here, it's going to be interesting to watch. And I don't mean to talk about this as though it's a football game, but it's way more interesting than a football game. You've got Nasrallah, who just gave his speech the other day that I heard was really powerful. I mean, I had parts of it read to me. He's a good speaker, and he's a smart guy. And no, I'm not eulogizing Nasrallah, but you've got to recognize your adversary. The Israelis have greatly respect him, and there's a line in there where he talks about what is coming for Israel. And Nasrallah always talks this way, but the problem is when he says something, he usually follows through. And, it sounds like empty bombast, but often it is not. And so when he talks about drones, he's like, yeah, you're worried about the missiles. We've got plenty of those. But the drones are the thing what's going to hurt you. And we have so many, I just don't know what to do with them. And as we talked about a little bit, for whatever reason or however, Hezbollah is using many of the same tactics that Ukrainian drone operators are using, to include the use of offline drones, tactics, so that you don't have to be jammed. And there's various ways to make a drone go offline. That you can familiarize it essentially with the terrain or with a map, and then it runs off its own memory. There's no external link. I'm not explaining this in the correct technical terms, but and Hezbollah can do this. Hezbollah, by the Israelis' admission, I've spoken to the head of the Israeli drone command. He said Hezbollah is way ahead of them as far as sophistication of their, not so much sophistication of their drones, but of their tactics, which is a very interesting comment. Very interesting. You know, I wonder where they're getting their training from. Yeah, that is so that certainly is lurking in the wings. And the point is that the decision may not be solely in Israeli hands. The discussions right now center around the fact that 70,000 Israelis had been evacuated from northern Israel. And the question of, well, look, that's already a violation of our sovereignty, which means that we are at war. And unless they can return to their homes, we still are at war, and we need to take measures that will allow them to do so. So the only thing that will prevent a war in the north is if Nasrallah agrees just to stop the rocket attacks. He said he would when the fighting in Gaza ended, when there was a ceasefire. Well, the fighting is ending in Gaza, it's dying down, but I don't think it's going to be observed by Nasrallah as the Israelis observing his demand, right? So that's number one. It's probably not going to happen. Number two is some kind of international agreement. I mean, you guys can judge how likely that is, right?
Yeah.
A third is the Israelis actually go in and invade. And the invasion could be a limited push up to the Litani River. We always use that term, the Litani River. The Litani River it's a useful demarcation because north of the Litani River, you're getting, if you're north of the Litani River and you want to hit Israel with rockets and missiles, you're using more sophisticated models, right? Of which Hezbollah has a lower inventory. But the problem is this, that the Hezbollah in southern Lebanon live there. All right. So it doesn't make sense to push them back north of the, I mean, they live there with their wives, families, kids. So it's really difficult to talk about moving the militia backwards. The militia, in a sense, is embedded in the population. So anyway, so that would be first case scenario, an invasion up to Litani River. Another scenario, second, would be almost a complete invasion of Lebanon. All right, to include an amphibious assault in the north, perhaps vicinity of Tripoli in Lebanon, obviously, and approaching Beirut from north and south simultaneously. 2 years ago, the Israeli 99th Division did an exercise in Cyprus, or an amphibious assault to simulate a landing in northern Lebanon. So it's there. I mean, it's in their plans. It's in their contingency plans for Lebanon. They've got, to use our terms, they've got kind of a series of FDOs from what they're doing now, which are targeted strikes. I mean, they've got all these targets pre-planned. And so when rockets start coming in, you'll notice that aircraft are already almost in the air and they're striking. But the problem is they're not hitting the point of origin. They're hitting previous known targets. There's no telling whether there's anything even there. It
Right.
makes everyone feel good.
Yeah.
But as well as not, they're not done. They're moving all the time. I mean, Hamas is being effective in using launch sites and scarpering right afterwards. So in Hezbollah is way more sophisticated than Hamas. So sadly, I think that war in the north sooner or later is going to be unavoidable. Well, it's occurring. It depends what you call war. I mean, there is a free exchange of fire almost daily across the border, and there are casualties on both sides. That to me seems like a war already.
What happens if Hezbollah let's rip their million arsenal of rockets and drones and all that stuff, and the Iron Dome is oversaturated,
overwhelmed. Yeah. That's
that's a legitimate threat, right?
That's the biggest fear, and no one can answer that question. Well, let me put it this way. Anyone who claims that Iron Dome, Arrow, and David Sling between them are enough to block such an attack really hasn't looked at the problem. It is of course the US would pick up the inevitable delta between what the Israelis can handle and what is launched at them because there is going to be a big difference. We saw that when Iran launched all those drones and missiles. Everyone was like, yeah, that was just a, a slap in the face. Well, guess what? If the US ships hadn't been out there knocking those things down, and it was mainly US ships. Yeah, I get it. Jordan and the UK knocked down one apiece, whatever. But if the United States had not done that, the damage to Israel would have been quite a bit more severe. And that is not something that is readily acknowledged in Israel. I was there, and no one said to me, "Hey, you're American, thank you." You say it was all about, yeah, we stopped them. That's what the Israeli public was being told, that their own systems stopped that attack. Not true. And so, and that was kind of a half-hearted attack. I mean, compared to what Hezbollah, if Hezbollah goes to war, they know they're going to war. Netanyahu has already said publicly, we will turn southern Lebanon into Gaza. All right. So Nasrallah knows what's in store for him, and it's going to be all out. And it will be very ugly indeed. The Israeli army has, the IDF has learned they have many limitations, a lot of it based on their training and selection. No, just training of personnel. The reservists are not up to target, are not up to snuff for a war, even post Gaza, because in Gaza what they were doing basically was occupying territory. You'd have supporting arms flatten an area. You'd have special operations forces go in, get a foothold. You'd have the units reconnaissance platoons go in and expand that foothold. And then finally you truck in the conventional soldiers. They get off in a bivouac area in the middle of, whatever their operation areas, and then they expand from there. They suffered very low casualties, so they haven't been at war. All this talk about their combat veterans. Okay, I get it. Nominally, they've been in combat, but they haven't been looking guys in the face, shooting them. It's been combat like a giant cax, I would suggest. And that is going to be different than what they face in Hezbollah, with Hezbollah, a lot different. And the lessons of 2006 have been forgotten.
Yikes. That sounds like it's going to be an absolute shit show. Great. Thanks,
Okay,
Andy, for the great news.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned Cyprus. I saw that Nasrallah gave a speech recently. I don't remember exactly when it was. And he specifically singled out Cyprus as threatening them and said, keep it up and you're next. Keep aiding Israel and you're next. Cyprus is like,
yeah,
what
poor
the
old
hell?
Cyprus, man. Yeah. All we want to do is host tourists and, and party. All right.
Guys, that was great. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on audio, rate and review it. Patreon is patreon.com/theteamhouse. Tell your friends. Andy Milburn. He's got a book. It's in the description.
Yeah.
Check him out. All the links are in the description. So thank you so much.
And check out my Substack if you're interested in the world.
Check out Jason's OnlyFans.
Yeah. If you want to hear from me, we can meet up for coffee. Bring money.
You, the guest, audience, and Julian Assange.
Yes.
Yeah.
It sounds like a
special
competition,
guest.
right? The winner.
Julian.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
All right. All the best. See you next week.
All right, gents.